During the Battle of Santa Cruz, there were a lot of Japanese planes come in to attack the carriers, and we shot down quite a few of the planes, and one of them that we shot down was still afloat. It didn't sink right away, and so the pilot crawled out of the cockpit and he got out on the wing, and so we had orders to go over and try to pick him up and maybe get some information from him. But we put a seaplane, we put a boat in the water, in other words, and a crew started over there to pick him up. And when we got within a shooting distance, he pulled out a .45 he had, and he started shooting at the crew of the whaleboat. And of course, then the whaleboat stopped, and he kept shooting, and so the officer on board the destroyer said, "Open fire and sink it, and him with it." So they did. They opened fire, and he was killed, which is what he wanted, really. He didn't want to, Japanese didn't like to be taken prisoner. And so then the plane was still afloat, so our captain got the orders to sink it. So instead of shooting at it, he decided to ram it and sink it. And on a destroyer, that's not a good idea because their bow is apparently, it isn't armor plated. So we rammed it, and it did sink it, but he got a message from the commander of the task force, "That was not well done. That is not the way to do it." So it accomplished what we were trying to do, but it wasn't the right thing to do.
Thanks for explaining that. When you say you all opened fire, what did you all open fire with?
Oh, well, the 20 millimeters were our deck gun. They replaced the 50 caliber. They were more efficient and they were a little bigger. And so they just opened up with a couple 20 millimeters and blew him away. That's all there was to it. And he, of course, he just asked for it, really. A lot of them, during the war, you've probably seen pictures of them committing suicide, committing hara-kiri and all that. They just had the idea that if they were captured, they would be tortured, and they didn't want to do it. But
sure.
So they didn't get a lot of prisoners. I remember one time we was with the PT boats in New Guinea, and we captured 3 Japanese, and they had them on the bow of the PT boat, and was headed back in to the tender, and it was real hot. Of course, it was right on the equator. So this one Japanese was sitting on the bow there. He asked for a drink of water. So when the guy went over to give him a drink of water, the Jap grabbed his gun off him, and he shot the guard shooting that was guarding them, killed him. So the other guard just opened up on all 3 of them and dumped them over the side.
You saw that?
I didn't see it. They told me about it when they come back in.
Wow.
But they didn't bring any prisoners, I noticed that. After the Higgins boat picked all the survivors up out of the water, we headed back to Guadalcanal, and they had a group of sheds set up as a temporary hospital, and they gave us quick emergency treatment. In my case, they put sulfa, that's what I'm trying to say, put sulfa in the wound where my leg was hit, and then they wrapped it up, and then where I had been hit and behind the ear, they put a bandage on my head, and then they, by then it was the first night, and a lot of the people were put in these sheds for the first night to till they could organize us better. So I had a good shipmate right next to me in the shed, and he hadn't been injured really physically, but he had not been a very good swimmer evidently, and he swallowed a lot of fuel oil when he was banding ship and was in the water, and he kept saying that he couldn't breathe good. But so I asked a pharmacist mate if they had some oxygen. They found a small bottle, and we hooked him up to that. And after about an hour or so, he said, "I'm running out of oxygen here," and he said, "I'm having trouble breathing again." And I asked him if they had more oxygen around. Well, they checked and come back and told me no, they just didn't have any at all. And so he survived a while after that, but he kept getting worse. And actually, before morning, he passed away. And his name was Mayfield, and he was a ship's cook on the Cushing, and we used to call him Chillibean, and he was a good friend of mine. So it really disturbed me to see him suffer like that and not being able to help him. But he tried his best, couldn't quite make it.
Can you tell me more about Mayfield? What kind of person was he, sir?
Mayfield was, like I say, was a ship's cook, and we used to come by where the galley was, and he'd give us a handout if we wanted it. And we'd go ashore once in a while together, and he was a real likable fella. I knew him most all the time I was on the Cushing, but I didn't, he wasn't around me all the time, but he was a good friend, I'll put it that way. And we enjoyed being on Liberty together and different things like that. And it was really tragic to watch him try to survive the night, and I'd never had that experience before, and it really shook me up.
Can you tell me, were there a lot of men like Mayfield who were in the sheds because of swallowing?
I assume there was, although I didn't have really direct contact with them. It was dark, and we were only in this shed one night, and they were scattered out, so I didn't really know if there was many, but I understand quite a few of them had swallowed oil, and it was a problem with them. But I really didn't have any other direct experience other than with Mayfield.
What was Mayfield saying to you after they weren't able to find more oxygen?
Well, he just kept saying that he was having trouble breathing, and pretty soon he wasn't saying anything because he just couldn't catch his breath enough to talk. But he just slipped away. I thought he was going to sleep, but he just didn't wake up.
How old would you say Mayfield was when he was killed?
Well, he was probably about my age. We were in our early 20s, maybe 21, 22, something like that.
Is there anything else you can mention about Mayfield? What made him tick? What made him a unique person?
Well, he was a real friendly fella, and he was a good cook, and we'd go and bum something off of the galley, and he'd fix it and give it to us. So he was just a real friendly person, and he was he prepared good food, which is kind of unusual in some ships.